Odysseus is supposed to be the greatest hero who ever lived. The man who outsmarted gods, survived monsters, and fought his way home across an ocean. But fact number 1 on this list is so disturbing, so morally wrong, that most schools refuse to teach it. And Christopher Nolan? He cut it from his $250 million movie entirely. With Nolan's Odyssey smashing records right now, over $700 million at the box office, millions of people think they know this story. But the version you saw in theaters? That's the sanitized version. The real Odyssey, the one written almost 3,000 years ago, is far darker, far stranger, and far more brilliant than anything Hollywood will ever show you. So here are 25 facts about the Odyssey that you probably don't know. And I promise you, stick around until the end, because fact number 1 will change how you see the entire poem. Number 25. The word Odyssey comes from this poem. Every time someone says "what an Odyssey" to describe a long, painful journey, they're quoting Homer. The English word Odyssey, lowercase, dictionary official, comes directly from Odysseus's name. One poem, written almost 3,000 years ago, became so famous that it literally became a word in our language. Not many books can say that. Number 24. Homer probably never existed. The man who wrote the most famous poem in human history might not be a man at all. Most scholars today believe Homer wasn't a single person. He was more like a brand name. The Odyssey was built over centuries by dozens, maybe hundreds, of traveling poets called Aoidoi, who performed the story from memory at festivals and royal courts. Each poet added their own twist, their own details, their own dramatic flair. The Homer we know is probably just the last poet in the chain, the one whose version finally got written down. Think of it like a song that's been remixed so many times, nobody remembers who wrote the original. Number 23. It was memorized for 400 years before anyone wrote it down. The Odyssey existed as pure memory for roughly 4 centuries. No paper, no scrolls, no hard drives. Just human brains passing 12,000 lines of poetry from one generation to the next. To pull this off, the poets used a clever hack. They built the poem with repeating phrases and rhythmic patterns that acted like mental anchors. That's why Homer keeps calling Odysseus cunning Odysseus and Athena gray-eyed Athena. Those aren't lazy writing, they're memory technology, ancient RAM chips for the human brain. It wasn't until around the 8th century BC that someone finally scratched it onto papyrus. And even then, different versions circulated for another 600 years before scholars in Alexandria tried to lock down one official text. Number 22. The poem has exactly 12,109 lines. Just to put that in perspective, if you read the Odyssey out loud, start to finish, at a normal pace, it would take you about 16 hours. 400 years of poets memorized 16 hours of poetry, without notes. Number 21. Odysseus doesn't show up until Book 5. The most famous hero in Greek mythology is completely absent from the first 4 books of his own story. Instead, the poem opens with his son, Telemachus, wandering around Greece looking for news about his missing father. The hero of the Odyssey doesn't even appear on the page until you're nearly 1/5 of the way through. It's actually one of the earliest examples of something filmmakers use constantly today. You build up the legend of a character before you ever show their face. By the time Odysseus finally shows up, you're desperate to meet him. Number 20. Homer described the sea as wine dark because ancient Greeks had no word for blue. This one is wild. Homer describes the Mediterranean Sea, one of the bluest bodies of water on Earth, as wine dark. Not blue, wine-colored, dark, and reddish. He describes sheep as violet, honey as green, the sky as bronze. And in the entire 12,109-line poem, the word blue appears exactly 0 times. Number 19. The Sirens were ugly bird women, not beautiful mermaids. Forget everything you think you know about sirens. In the original Greek mythology, Sirens weren't gorgeous women lounging on rocks. They were bird monsters, human heads stitched onto the bodies of giant birds with talons and feathers and wings. In ancient Greek art, they're shown sitting on islands surrounded by rotting corpses of the sailors they lured to death. They weren't symbols of beauty, they were symbols of death. The sexy mermaid version? That came centuries later when medieval European artists decided bird women weren't attractive enough. They swapped the feathers for fishtails and Hollywood ran with it. But Homer's sirens? They would have been nightmare fuel. Number 18. A real solar eclipse matches the poem's astronomy. In Book 20 of the Odyssey, a prophet screams that the sun has perished from the sky and darkness covers the earth. For centuries, people assumed this was just dramatic metaphor. Then, in 2008, two researchers ran every astronomical detail mentioned in the poem through modern calculation software. And every single detail lined up with one specific date: April 16, 1178 BC. On that exact day, a total solar eclipse darkened the skies over the Ionian Sea, the same waters Odysseus was supposedly sailing. Does this mean the Odyssey is based on a true story? Probably not. But it means whoever composed that section of the poem was describing real astronomical events from over 3,000 years ago. Number 17. The Odyssey may have been written by a woman. In 1897, a British writer named Samuel Butler published a book with one of the most controversial claims in literary history. He argued that the Odyssey was written by a young, unmarried woman from Sicily. His evidence? The female characters in the Odyssey, Athena, Circe, Calypso, Penelope, Nausicaa, are all complex, intelligent, and powerful. The male characters, by comparison, are often one-dimensional. Butler argued that no male poet of that era would give women that much depth and agency. He even identified the specific character he believed was the author's self-portrait: Nausicaa, the clever young princess who rescues Odysseus on the beach. Number 16. Odysseus invented the Trojan horse, the most famous military strategy in all of history. The trick that ended the 10-year Trojan War was Odysseus's idea. He designed a massive, hollow wooden horse, hid Greek soldiers inside it, and convinced the Trojans it was a gift from the gods. The Trojans dragged it through their gates. That night, the Greeks crawled out, opened the city doors, and burned Troy to the ground. Number 15. The nobody trick is the most brilliant lie in literature. When Odysseus and his men get trapped inside the Cyclops Polyphemus's cave, the one-eyed giant asks his name. Odysseus answers, "My name is Nobody." Then he gets the Cyclops drunk on wine. When the monster passes out, Odysseus drives a burning wooden stake into his eye. Polyphemus screams. The other Cyclopes on the island rush to his cave and shout, "Who's hurting you?" Polyphemus screams back, "Nobody is hurting me." So they leave, because if nobody is hurting him, he must be fine. Number 14. The word pharmacy comes from Circe's magic. When the witch Circe transforms Odysseus's men into pigs, Homer says she used pharmaca, magical drugs mixed into their food and wine. That Greek word, pharmaca, is the direct ancestor of the English word pharmacy. Number 13. The Lotus Eaters might describe real drug addiction. In Book 9, Odysseus lands on an island where the locals eat a plant called Lotus. Anyone who eats it immediately forgets their family, their home, and their desire to ever leave. They just stop caring about everything. Scholars have debated for centuries what this plant actually was. The leading theories: the opium poppy, a fermented persimmon wine, or the Egyptian blue water lily, which contains natural psychoactive compounds. Number 12. The Cyclops myth probably came from elephant skulls. Paleontologists believe they know exactly where the one-eyed giant myth came from. And the answer is weirder than the myth itself. On islands across the Mediterranean, Crete, Sicily, Cyprus, ancient Greeks kept finding enormous skulls with a single massive hole in the center of the face. To them, it looked exactly like the skull of a giant with one eye. In reality, Those skulls belonged to Dinotherium, an extinct relative of the elephant that stood over 15 feet tall. The eye socket was actually the nasal cavity where the trunk attached. Number 11. Scylla and Charybdis are real places. The terrifying narrow passage between a six-headed sea monster and a ship-swallowing whirlpool? It's a real place. The Strait of Messina, between Sicily and mainland Italy, is one of the most dangerous waterways in the Mediterranean. The strait produces violent, unpredictable whirlpools caused by conflicting tidal currents between the Ionian and Tyrrhenian seas. The rocky coast on the Italian side, where Homer placed Scylla, is still called Scylla today. The town literally kept the monster's name. Number 10. Nobody knows where Ithaca actually is. Odysseus spent 20 years trying to get home to Ithaca, and we still don't know where it is. Yes, there's a Greek island called Ithaca today, but Homer's descriptions don't match it. He said Ithaca was low-lying and furthest to the west. Modern Ithaca is mountainous and not particularly western. Nobody has found Odysseus's palace on either island, the greatest homecoming in literature, and we can't find the home. Number 9. Odysseus literally traveled to the land of the dead. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus sails to the edge of the world and performs a blood ritual to open a passage to the underworld. He pours blood into a trench. The dead rise like shadows, drawn to the warmth of living blood, and crowd around him. He speaks with the ghost of the prophet Tiresias, who warns him about the dangers ahead. He meets the spirit of his own mother, who died of grief while waiting for him to come home. He didn't even know she was dead. He tries to embrace her. 3 times he reaches for her. 3 times his arms pass through empty air. Number 8. His dog waited 20 years and died the moment he saw him. When Odysseus finally returns to Ithaca after 20 years, he comes disguised as a beggar. Nobody recognizes him, not his wife, not his son, not his servants. But his old hunting dog, Argos, is lying on a pile of dung outside the palace, neglected, covered in fleas, barely alive. The moment Argos sees Odysseus, even through the disguise, the dog lifts his head, he wags his tail, he drops his ears. After 20 years of waiting, he recognizes his master instantly. Number 7. Penelope's shroud trick lasted 3 years. While Odysseus was gone, over 100 suitors invaded his home, eating his food, drinking his wine, and demanding that Penelope choose one of them to marry. She needed to stall, and she came up with something brilliant. She told them she would choose a husband, as soon as she finished weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus's elderly father. It was a sacred duty. Nobody could argue with it. Every day she wove. Every night, after everyone went to sleep, she crept back to the loom and unraveled everything she'd made that day. She kept this up for 3 full years. 3 years of weaving and unweaving the same cloth night after night, buying time for a husband she refused to believe was dead. She was only caught when one of her own servants betrayed the secret. Number 6. Poseidon's curse happened because Odysseus couldn't keep his mouth shut. After the nobody trick worked perfectly, Odysseus had the greatest escape of his life. He was on the boat. He was sailing away. He was free. And then, his ego ruined everything. He couldn't resist shouting back at the blinded Cyclops. He screamed his real name. He screamed his father's name. He told the monster exactly where he lived. Number 5. Odysseus deliberately sacrificed 6 men to Scylla. When Odysseus sailed through the strait between Scylla and Charybdis, Circe gave him a choice. Sail too close to Charybdis, and the whirlpool would swallow the entire ship. Or sail toward Scylla, and the 6-headed monster would snatch exactly 6 men from the deck. Odysseus chose Scylla. He deliberately steered his ship toward a monster he knew would kill 6 of his crew, because losing 6 was better than losing everyone. He didn't warn his men. He didn't tell them what was coming. He just watched as Scylla's heads plunged down and ripped 6 screaming sailors off the deck, 1 in each mouth. Number 4. Polyphemus ate Odysseus's men alive, and Homer describes the sounds. Most people know the Cyclops captures Odysseus's men, but most retellings clean up what actually happens in the cave. Homer doesn't. Polyphemus grabs 2 of Odysseus's men and smashes them against the ground like puppies. Then he eats them. The remaining men are trapped in the cave, watching, knowing they could be next, listening to the sounds of their friends being consumed. Number 3. The Suitor massacre wasn't heroic. It was a bloodbath. When Odysseus finally reveals himself and takes his revenge on the 108 suitors who overran his home, the scene is not the triumphant heroic victory you'd expect. It's a locked room slaughter. Odysseus bars the doors. The suitors have no weapons. And then he and Telemachus systematically kill every single one of them. The hall fills with blood. Bodies pile up. Men beg for mercy and receive none. Number 2. The ending is one of the most debated in literature. Scholars have argued for centuries that the Odyssey's real ending might be missing, or rewritten, or tacked on by a later poet. The poem feels like it should end with Odysseus and Penelope reuniting. The moment he passes her secret test, proving he knows their bed was carved from a living olive tree, rooted into the ground, impossible to move, that feels like the climax, the real ending. But the poem keeps going. It adds an awkward scene in the underworld. It adds the battle with the suitors' families. And then it just stops. Athena commands peace. Everyone agrees. The end. Number 1. The hanging of the 12 slave women. This is the fact that changes everything. After Odysseus kills the suitors, he turns his attention to the household staff. 12 enslaved women had been forced into sexual relationships with the suitors during his absence. Some of them were assaulted. Some had no choice in any of it. Odysseus orders their execution anyway. He tells Telemachus to kill them with swords. But his son, his 20-year-old son, decides that's too clean, too honorable. Instead, Telemachus strings the ship's cable across the courtyard and hangs all 12 women in a row. Homer describes them twitching. He describes their feet kicking. He compares them to birds caught in a net. And then he moves on. The poem keeps going as if it didn't just describe one of the most horrifying acts of violence in ancient literature. These women are never named. They don't get backstories. They don't get to speak in their own defense. They exist in the poem for one purpose: to be punished for something that was done to them. Sophocles once wrote, "All is disgrace when the doer's mind is evil." The Odyssey is the greatest adventure ever told. But it's also a story about what power does to people who believe they've earned the right to use it. And that's the part nobody teaches you. 3,000 years ago, someone sat down and told a story about a man trying to get home. That story survived 400 years of human memory, countless retellings, the fall of civilizations, and now, a $250 million Christopher Nolan film. But the real story, the one in the poem, is messier than any movie. It's darker, more complicated, more human, and maybe that's why it survived. Because the Odyssey isn't really about monsters and gods, it's about what we're willing to do and what we're willing to forgive to get back to the people we love.